What started as a peaceful morning quickly turned into a scene of chaos and fear. In this video we uncover the shocking events of the elephant stampede that shook India. You will see how a single moment can change the lives of an entire community forever. Stay with us as we reveal the causes, the impact, and the unbelievable escape stories. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss such powerful true stories. 1. The unexpected morning chaos. The peaceful dawn in the village was suddenly broken by distant heavy rhythmic footsteps in the ground. A deep trembling ran through the soil beneath the feet of villagers, sending waves of panic across homes. Children peered out from narrow doorways, their eyes wide as they listened to the growing pounding sound. Women gathered baskets and clothing with haste, sensing danger before the source was even in sight. Birds fled from towering trees and hurried flocks, leaving the sky swarming with restless dark shapes. The pounding of massive feet became louder, shaking walls and stirring fear in every corner of the town. A sharp trumpet call from the distance cut through the air like an urgent warning to all who heard it. Houses creaked under the vibrations as the herd approached the edge of the outer settlement quickly. Men rushed to lock cattle sheds and pull carts to safety from the main path leading into the village. Fear spread like fire among people as the rising dust cloud grew darker against the morning sun. Shouts echoed through streets, urging families to run toward the higher ground near the rocky hill. Dogs barked wildly, their voices mixing with the growing chaos of human and animal sounds together. The first elephants emerged from the dust, their enormous forms towering over the tallest rooftops. The sheer number of elephants left villagers frozen in shock, unable to process the dangerous scene. Some elephants veered into farmlands, destroying weeks of work in a few crushing and careless steps. Others tore through wooden fences with ease, leaving splintered remains scattered on the dry earth. The sound of their steps was deafening as the ground seemed to pulse under each powerful stride. 2. The first sight of the herd, the rising sun, revealed a massive herd of elephants moving together like a single unstoppable living wave. Dozens of enormous bodies swayed side by side, their ears flaring and tails lashing in visible distress. Their eyes showed fear mixed with aggression, as if torn between escape and the urge to defend. The largest bull elephant led the charge, with tusks glinting sharply under the dim golden light. Villagers gathered on rooftops for safety, staring down at the advancing force with disbelief. The air was heavy with tension as the herd's presence altered the stillness of the early morning. Every step crushed the dry soil into deep prints that marked the path of destruction left behind. Farmers dropped their tools and sprinted away, fearing the stampede would sweep them underfoot. Younger elephants stayed close to their mothers, their small trunks swinging nervously as they ran. Trumpeting cries rose and fell through the air like desperate signals to keep the herd together. It was clear the animals were fleeing from an unknown danger somewhere beyond the forest. Their relentless pace showed no sign of slowing or changing course toward safer open land. Tall trees snapped like brittle twigs as they plowed forward with unstoppable force and energy. Goats and chickens scattered through narrow lanes, chased by dust clouds rolling ahead of the herd. Some men climbed storage huts to watch the movement and guess where the animals might turn. 3. Why the elephants left the forest. Whispers spread quickly about what had driven the elephants to storm into the human settlement. Some elders claimed poachers had disturbed the herd deep within their ancient forest territory. Others believed expanding farmland had destroyed feeding grounds, forcing migration for survival. Rumors spoke of a forest fire miles away, pushing the animals to escape the dangerous smoke. Whatever the truth, the elephants were clearly desperate, hungry, and in a heightened state of fear. It was possible their usual waterholes had dried up in the punishing heat of the summer season. The lead bull may have sensed danger from hunters, prompting a swift and sudden departure. A loud explosion in the hills could have triggered a panic response in the entire herd instantly. Loss of natural resources is known to cause animals to move unpredictably into risky areas. Human expansion over decades has reduced the space elephants once roamed freely and safely. This shrinking habitat creates more encounters between wild herds and farming communities. Wildlife experts warn that such incidents will rise without immediate protection of natural land. The unusual path of the herd showed confusion, as if they had lost their usual guiding routes. Later reports confirmed human activity had recently disturbed the herd's grazing zone deeply. Forest rangers noted the elephants were highly agitated and more aggressive than normal. Their restless movements suggested they were also separated from familiar parts of their home. 4. The path of destruction. The herd's advance carved a path of chaos across the farmland that surrounded the small village. Lush fields of rice and wheat were flattened under the sheer force of hundreds of pounding feet. Irrigation channels collapsed, spilling water into uneven pools across the damaged farmland. Mud mixed with broken stalks and scattered grain lay in heaps where crops once stood tall. Trees that had shaded farmers for years were torn down Fence posts snapped and livestock pens were reduced to scattered fragments in the dirt. Banana groves fell in seconds under the sweeping trunks of hungry elephants on the move. Storage huts were overturned, spilling grain that drew more animals into the fray of chaos. Villagers could do nothing but watch as months of hard labor were destroyed in mere moments. Each step of the stampede sent tremors through the ground, shaking even the farthest houses. The dust cloud over the herd hung heavy in the air, making it hard to breathe or see clearly. The once calm surroundings now echoed with the thunder of movement and cracking wood. Some elephants strayed into courtyards, knocking over carts and crushing stored vegetables. The damage extended far beyond crops as the very layout of the land was altered in hours. Footprints as wide as cooking pots filled with rainwater days later, marking the trail forever. 5. Panic among the villagers. Fear gripped the village like a cold hand as the thunder of the herd filled every open space. Mothers clutched children tightly, rushing toward higher ground away from the direct path. Elderly men leaned on sticks, moving as fast as their weakened bodies could carry them. Shouts of warning rose above the pounding of feet as panic spread in every direction. Families abandoned cooking fires, leaving meals half prepared in their haste to escape. Men tried to herd cattle away, but many animals broke loose in mounting confusion. The smell of dust and animal sweat hung thick as the herd drew ever closer to the center. Hens flapped wildly, scattering feathers across narrow alleys between old mud houses. Some people hid in strong stone storage rooms, praying the elephants would pass quickly. Others climbed to rooftops, hoping height would offer a safe vantage away from danger. The sound of trumpeting echoed through every corner, amplifying the terror of the moment. Even the most experienced farmers admitted they had never faced such a situation before. Injuries occurred as people stumbled in their rush to flee or shield loved ones from harm. Many clung to their neighbors for support, forming small groups that moved together. Children cried out for missing parents, separated in the thick haze of rising dust clouds. 6. The struggle to protect livestock. Farmers risked their lives to guide cattle away from the stampede path toward safe enclosures. Some cows broke free in terror, running straight into the chaos and vanishing in the dust. Goats scattered across open fields, making it nearly impossible to gather them in time. Buffaloes resisted, moving their heavy bodies, slowing attempts to reach higher ground. Shepherds shouted commands desperately, but the noise drowned every call to the animals. A few men formed human chains to steer herds toward a safer ridge beyond the village. One by one, livestock pens collapsed as elephants brushed past without slowing their pace. Chickens darted under fences while pigs squealed in fright and fled toward the riverbank. The loss of animals meant more than food, it meant the loss of a family's main livelihood. For some, the bond with their livestock was as deep as any bond with family members. Men returned later to find tether ropes snapped and feeding troughs overturned in the dirt. The struggle to protect livestock was as fierce as protecting one's own home and kin. This fight for survival bonded neighbors in ways that would last far beyond the disaster. The memory of those losses would remain in the hearts of villagers for countless seasons. 7. The role of the village elders. When fear threatened to overwhelm the villagers, the elders stepped forward to guide action. Their calm voices carried over the noise, urging people to follow trusted escape routes. They reminded families of safe zones used during past floods and wild animal incursions. Old men knew the terrain well enough to predict where the herd might turn or slow down. Women elders organized children into groups, making sure none were left unattended. The elders' authority kept people from scattering into dangerous open areas in panic. Stories from decades past about elephant crossings gave clues about likely escape paths. One elder climbed the bell tower to signal the start of an organized evacuation plan. Another took charge of securing granaries from accidental damage during the stampede. They coordinated younger villagers to form teams for protecting water sources and wells. When the danger passed, the elders led efforts to assess damage and plan recovery. They were the living memory of the village and acted as the anchors in a time of storm. Without their leadership, the disaster could have cost far more lives and homes. Their actions ensured the survival of many who might have otherwise been lost. 8. The sound of the stampede. The noise of the stampede was unlike anything the villagers had heard in their lifetime. It began as a faint rumble like faraway thunder and grew into a shaking roar of movement. Each footstep landed with a thud that seemed to strike directly into the chest and bones. The trumpeting of the herd rose and fell like battle cries echoing across the valley walls. Wood splintered under pressure and the sound cracked like firewood breaking in the night. The heavy breathing of the elephants mixed with the grunts of younger calves in distress. The roar of breaking trees carried far beyond the limits of the small rural settlement. Animals from the village added their calls, creating a chorus of panic in every direction. The earth itself groaned the danger had faded away. It became one of the most powerful memories linked to that day's fearful events. The Stampede's noise was proof of nature's ability to overwhelm human senses entirely. 9. Acts of courage. Even in the midst of chaos, some villagers showed extraordinary bravery beyond measure. A young man risked his life to lead a lost child from the direct path of the oncoming herd. Several women formed a shield around infants while moving toward higher rocky ground. One farmer used his cart to block a narrow lane, giving families more time to escape. A group of boys guided frightened goats into a hidden pen out of the herd's sight. Another man carried an elderly neighbor on his back away from collapsing structures. These acts were done without thought for reward, only to save lives in the moment. Courage often appeared in the smallest gestures, like sharing water with the injured. They proved that even in fear, humans can rise to protect one another at any cost. Courage in the face of nature's force is rare, but that day it shone brightly in the village. Some rescuers still carried scars from debris or close encounters with the herd. These marks became badges of honor in the eyes of their grateful neighbors. The spirit of unity built through courage remained long after the stampede ended. It became a reminder that human strength lies in cooperation and sacrifice. That day showed the best of humanity in the worst of circumstances nature could bring. 10. The herd's exit. As suddenly as it began, the herd began to turn away from the heart of the village. The lead elephant shifted course toward the riverbed that curved around the far fields. One by one the massive bodies followed, leaving behind clouds of dust and broken land. The villagers watched in silence, too exhausted to cheer but relieved it was over. The sound of their retreat was still loud but slowly faded into a steady distant murmur. Children clung to their parents, their eyes fixed on the disappearing gray shapes. Some elephants paused to drink from the shallow pools left by broken irrigation lines. Others stopped briefly to rest before moving again toward the thick forest boundary. The trail behind them was littered with debris from fences, trees, and scattered grain. Men stepped cautiously into the open, unsure if the herd might turn back suddenly. The elders signaled that it was safe but urged everyone to remain alert and careful. The sky cleared as the dust began to settle, revealing the full extent of the damage. Every path they crossed bore deep footprints that would remain for weeks in the mud. The air still carried the smell of trampled vegetation and churned soil from the chaos. 11. The first moments after the stampede, when the herd was gone, the village stood in stunned silence, unable to believe it had ended. The dust still hung in the air like a curtain between the people and the ruined farmland. Cautious steps were taken toward the open streets as fear of a return still gripped many. Children cried softly, clinging to mothers who tried to comfort them despite their own fear. Men surveyed the damage to homes, fields, and livestock with heavy hearts and tired eyes. Broken carts lay overturned while cooking fires had long since gone cold in the chaos. Uprooted trees blocked paths, forcing villagers to find new routes through the debris. Some wells had been cracked by the vibrations, leaving water contaminated and unsafe. The once lush green edges of the village were now flattened under deep muddy footprints. Everywhere lay signs of the power and weight that had rolled through only moments before. A few brave elders began checking on neighbors to ensure all were accounted for alive. Injured animals lay groaning in corners while injured people were carried to safety. The smell of dust mixed with the sharp scent of crushed plants filled the air heavily. For a moment no one spoke loudly, as if raising voices might invite danger back. Some villagers simply sat where they were, unable to move after the strain of the event. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and touched with the uncertainty of the unknown. The scene was one of survival but also of shock at the fragility of human settlements. In that first quiet hour, the reality of loss began to settle over the small rural community. The stampede was over, yet its shadow remained heavy across every heart and home. It was only the start of a long recovery that would test the resilience of the entire village. 12. The damage to homes and crops. The destruction to property was immense, with entire sections of farmland completely ruined. Huts made from mud and bamboo had collapsed under the force of moving elephant bodies. Walls bore deep cracks where tusks or massive shoulders had pushed past in narrow lanes. Roof thatch lay scattered like dry grass across courtyards, stripped away by brushing trucks. Granaries had spilled their stores onto the ground, wasting food meant for the dry season. Fences that marked property boundaries were crushed beyond recognition or swept aside. Fields that once swayed with ripened grain were now barren stretches of trampled earth. Banana trees lay in heaps while sugarcane stalks had been chewed down to the roots. Even vegetable gardens close to houses were uprooted, leaving only churned muddy soil. Paths between homes were blocked by debris, forcing people to climb over wreckage. Tools used for farming lay broken under the weight of hundreds of trampling feet. Everywhere the eye turned there was evidence of the unstable livestock shelters had collapsed, leaving animals exposed and frightened in the open. Many villagers now face the task of rebuilding with little to no remaining resources. The elders gathered to record each loss for future help from nearby communities. This record would become a plea for aid when traveling merchants or officials arrived. The damage left by the stampede was not just physical but deeply emotional as well. The heart of the village had been torn apart by the sheer force of nature's will. 13. The work of the forest rangers. News of the stampede reached the nearest forest outpost hours after the event had begun. Rangers arrived in small teams carrying supplies and tools to assess the unfolding crisis. Their first task was to ensure the herd had fully returned to forest territory safely. Tracks were followed to confirm the animals had moved far from the village boundaries. They examined damaged areas to understand the exact path taken by the elephants. Interviews with villagers provided clues to what might have triggered the sudden rush. The rangers inspected water sources in the forest for signs of drought or contamination. They searched for evidence of human interference such as traps or illegal logging. Every finding was carefully noted to be part of a report for higher wildlife authorities. The goal was to prevent another similar event by identifying and removing the cause. Some rangers stayed behind to guide villagers in protecting fields with safe barriers. They advised planting buffer crops less attractive to elephants at the outer edges. Temporary watch posts were suggested to monitor future elephant movements nearby. Educational talks were held to help people understand the animals' behavior patterns. The rangers reminded everyone that the herd's aggression came from fear, not malice. They worked with patience to restore both safety and trust between man and nature. By nightfall, the forest teams had mapped the entire area affected by the stampede. This would help plan future responses should the herd approach the village again. Their work was a bridge between human needs and the wild forces beyond the forest. It marked the first step toward preventing such devastating encounters in the future. 14. Aid from neighboring villages. When word spread of the disaster, nearby villages began to send help without hesitation. Caravans of carts arrived carrying food, water, tools, and blankets for those affected. Young men volunteered to help rebuild collapsed homes and clear blocked pathways. Women brought cooked meals to feed families who had lost their stores in the chaos. Some offered spare livestock to replace animals that had been lost in the stampede. Skilled carpenters repaired broken carts and farm equipment essential for survival. Elders from other villages shared advice from similar past experiences with wildlife. They reminded the community that unity across villages was their greatest defense. Children from neighboring areas carried water pots and small bundles of firewood. Traders donated supplies even without payment, knowing repayment would take months. The injured were taken to larger settlements with better access to medicine and care. Temporary shelters were built from bamboo and cloth to house the displaced families. Songs were sung at night to lift spirits and remind everyone they were not alone. Stories of the aid would later become part of the legend of survival from the event. This collective effort restored hope that recovery was truly possible despite the loss. It proved that in rural life the bonds between villages are as strong as family ties. The sight of strangers working side by side with locals brought comfort and strength. Gratitude was openly expressed through shared meals and heartfelt words of thanks. Such aid reminded the villagers that while nature can destroy, human kindness can rebuild. It was a lesson in compassion that matched the severity of the disaster's challenge. 15. Rebuilding efforts begin once safety was certain. The slow process of rebuilding began under the hot midday sun. Men worked in teams to lift fallen beams and replace damaged supports and homes. Women wove fresh mats and patched cloth to repair shelter roofs for the coming rains. Children carried smaller loads of bricks, mud, and water to help wherever they could. Old materials were salvaged from the wreckage to be reused in reconstruction. Every family contributed in some way to the shared task of restoring the village. The sound of hammers replaced the earlier roar of the stampede in the open air. Cleared land revealed just how much of the village had been affected by the herd. Farmers replanted fast-growing vegetables to provide food in the shortest time. Wells were cleaned and repaired to ensure safe water for drinking and cooking. Some families decided to rebuild farther from the main paths elephants might take. Work continued from dawn until dark, driven by the urgent need to restore normal life. Elders supervised to ensure safety and fairness in the distribution of materials. Small successes like raising a repaired wall gave strength to keep going each day. The rebuilding was more than physical, it was also emotional healing for the people. Neighbors worked together, often sharing tools and labor without expectation of return. Children laughed again as they helped with light tasks, bringing joy to tired faces. By the end of the signs of a new beginning were visible across the village. The shared labor forged bonds that were even stronger than before the disaster. The effort proved that determination could stand firm even after nature's greatest test. 16. Stories told by survivors. As rebuilding continued, survivors began to share personal accounts of that terrible day. Each story was unique yet carried the same undercurrent of fear and awe for the herd. Some recalled the moment they first heard the rumble that grew into a living earthquake. Others spoke of the sight of tusks glinting as elephants charged down narrow village lanes. Parents described the desperate race to gather children and escape before the herd arrived. Farmers remembered watching helplessly as their year's work was crushed in seconds. One woman told of throwing food into a field to lead elephants away from nearby homes. A man spoke of the silence that fell after the herd vanished into the distant forest. Every account carried vivid detail of the sounds, smells, and feelings of the stampede. Listeners wept at the bravery and loss woven into each tale shared under the night sky. Elders encouraged this storytelling to preserve the event for future generations. The youngest children listened wide-eyed, learning both fear and respect for nature. Some tales became warnings about respecting the forest and its wild inhabitants. Others became symbols of courage, showing how unity can save lives in great danger. These stories bonded the community, further giving meaning to their shared survival. In time, they would be told as part of the village's identity, passed from parent to child. The stampede would never be forgotten, not only for its damage but for its lessons. Each retelling ensured the herd's impact remained alive in the collective memory. Through stories, the event became more than history, it became a part of who they were. The voices of survivors carried both pain and pride in equal measure through the years. 17. Lessons learned from the disaster. The stampede taught the villagers lessons that would shape their choices for years ahead. First was the need to maintain safe distances from the natural paths of wild elephants. Second was the importance of storing emergency supplies for unexpected crises. They learned to build stronger enclosures for livestock to protect them from harm. New escape routes were mapped so every family knew where to run in future danger. The elders advised planting certain crops less appealing to elephants near the borders. Children were taught the signs of approaching elephants, such as rumbling or dust clouds. Men practiced coordinated responses to guide people to safety without panic. Women prepared emergency bundles with food, water, and medicine ready at all times. Meetings were held to plan cooperation with nearby villages for mutual aid. These lessons were not only for survival but for peaceful coexistence with wildlife. Understanding the reasons behind animal behavior reduced fear and encouraged respect. The disaster became a catalyst for better relations with forest authorities and rangers. Villagers began keeping written records of unusual animal movements near their homes. They vowed never to ignore early warnings from the forest or signs of disturbance. Preparedness replaced helplessness as a guiding principle for community safety. The wisdom gained was as valuable as any material recovery after the disaster. Future generations would inherit both the memory and the survival strategies. The lessons turned a tragedy into a guide for living alongside the power of nature. In this way, the herd's passing left behind both scars and knowledge for the future. 18. Efforts to prevent future stampedes. With guidance from forest officials, the villagers began creating barriers of safety crops. These plants discouraged elephants from entering farmlands by masking edible scents. Watchtowers were built at key points to monitor the approach of any future herds. Drums and bells were placed in storage to use as signals during emergencies. Training sessions were held to teach younger villagers how to respond quickly. Paths for elephants were mapped and left open to guide them away from homes. Some farmland near the forest was converted into buffer zones for wildlife passage. Meetings were held with other villages to coordinate in case of cross-boundary herds. Rangers installed early warning systems using lookout posts in high ground areas. Agricultural planning now considered the seasonal movements of elephant groups. The goal was not to fight nature but to adapt and live in harmony with its rhythms. Local leaders spoke to schools about the importance of protecting elephant habitats. These measures aimed to reduce fear and promote respect between humans and animals. Awareness campaigns taught that frightened elephants could be more dangerous than calm. Villagers now felt more secure knowing they had plans to face such events together. The memory of the stampede was a constant reminder to keep these measures strong. Over time, the community became known for its balance between farming and conservation. This reputation attracted visitors who learned from their methods of peaceful coexistence. The effort showed that even after disaster, unity and planning could create lasting safety. The village stood as proof that resilience can transform tragedy into progress for all. 19. The return of the forest peace months after the stampede, the forest slowly returned to its quiet natural rhythm again. The herd was spotted deeper in the jungle, grazing peacefully far from human lands. Rangers confirmed the elephants had settled in areas with fresh water and food supply. No further incidents occurred as the measures in the village began showing success. Birdsong and the hum of insects once again filled the air where destruction had been. The scars in the land began to heal with new grass and crops growing in cleared areas. Streams cleared of debris flowed freely, bringing life back to the edges of the fields. The villagers felt relief knowing the elephants were safe in their rightful home. For many, the return of peace was a sign their efforts had been worth every hardship. Children played near the forest edges with greater awareness of its silent power. Farmers tended crops with renewed respect for the balance of nature's cycles. Stories of the stampede became lessons in both caution and coexistence. Elders offered prayers of thanks for the restored calm after such violent chaos. Wildlife thrived without the pressure that had once driven them into human land. The village's relationship with the forest was now built on knowledge, not fear. Visitors noted the harmony between man and nature as something rare and valuable. This peace was fragile but deeply treasured by those who had known the storm. The forest stood as a reminder that life can renew itself even after great destruction. The balance restored was a reward for patience, compassion, and shared determination. In the end, both the village and the herd found a way to live without crossing paths again. 20. Remembering the day forever. And every year the village marked the anniversary of the stampede with a day of remembrance. It was not a celebration but a reflection on the lessons and unity born from the event. Families gathered to share food and retell stories of courage and survival from that day. Children performed plays showing how the villagers had escaped and rebuilt together. Elders spoke about respecting the forest and keeping a safe, respectful distance always. Names of those who showed bravery were read aloud to honor their selfless actions. Visitors from other areas came to listen and learn from the village's shared history. Photos and drawings of the damage were kept as teaching tools for younger minds. Prayers were offered for both the people and the elephants who survived the ordeal. The day served as a reminder that nature's power is both beautiful and dangerous. This tradition kept the memory alive, ensuring it was never reduced to mere rumor. Songs composed after the event were sung to recall the fear and relief of that day. Art made from salvaged wood became symbols of endurance and renewal in the village. The memory was treated with respect as part of the identity of the whole community. By remembering, they also reinforced the measures that kept them safe from repeat events. The story of the stampede spread beyond the region, inspiring others to prepare for nature. Generations would pass, yet the tale would remain strong in the hearts of all descendants. The unity forged on that day became a guiding example in times of hardship or change. Thus, the stampede that once brought fear became a lasting lesson in survival and respect. It was proof that even the most powerful storms can leave behind seeds of wisdom to grow. Thus, the stampede that once brought fear became a lasting lesson in survival and respect. It was proof that even the most powerful storms can leave behind seeds of wisdom to grow. The elephant stampede left behind not just destruction but lessons for all of us to learn. From human expansion to wildlife survival, every factor played a role in this tragedy. Communities rebuilt stronger, but the memory of that day still lingers in every heart. Nature's power reminds us how small we are and why balance is key to peaceful living. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more gripping real-life stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your views on this event. Thank you for watching and staying with us until the end of this incredible story.